Hello, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts digital event. We would like to ask everyone to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. If you would like to contribute to the conversation during the program, you can do so via the chat window. At the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device, you should be able to see an option for chat. If you click that, it will open the chat window where all participants can enjoy this experience together. Thank you, and enjoy the event. Hello. Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this virtual event and presentation are solely those of the individual artists in their personal capacity and are not reflective of nor represent official policy, position, or views of New Jersey City University.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a great afternoon. My name is Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the Center for the Arts at NJCU. And we have today our NJCU BFA 2021 Artist Talk. And you're in for really an amazing afternoon. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our co-directors of the NJCU Galleries, Eileen Ferrara and Doris Casuelo. Eileen is an artist and curator with very deep roots in the Jersey City arts community. And she is the acting co-director of the Galleries with artist Doris Casuelo, who is the founder of Gaia Studio. So I'm going to turn the mic over to them to start us off.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you everyone at the Center for the Arts. Welcome everybody. It's good to see a few familiar faces out there and new faces too. We're very happy to be presenting this first group of students for the BFA thesis talks, and Professor Deborah Jack will be guiding us through today's talks. Deborah is the BFA thesis coordinator. She and the students have been working all semester on getting their final presentations together. So just before she does that, I just wanted to briefly introduce the guest critic that we're very honored to have today. Melissa McAlpin is an artist and educator, and she creates books, comics, zines, and illustrations. She's currently an associate professor at Felician University. McAlpin's work has been exhibited widely. Her books are in the collections of the Newark Public Library and also the Bingham Center Zine collection at Duke University, among other places. Melissa is a storyteller. I mean, I love to see that in her work. It's filled with very insightful and relatable observations. So I'm really glad that she was able to take some time to speak to our students about their work today. Thank you so much, Melissa. Okay, Deborah, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of our student art presentations, their art talks. And so this presentation is essentially where students are going to give a short artist statement and talk a bit about the concepts and a little bit about the background of their projects that they've developed with mentors throughout their BFA program in progress. So it's always nice to have them finally get to speak about their work. If you have an opportunity, please come by the art galleries so you can see the work in person. But this is just to sort of help you get a broader view of what they're showing. And so today we're going to start off with Katherine Zambrano, who is a graphic design in the graphic design program, and she'll be presenting her work here today.
Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Katherine Zambrano, and I'm going to present my BFA thesis today. Next slide, please. So for my thesis, I decided to design and write a book about my personal experience on children immigration. Migrating at such a young age left a few traumas, both mentally and emotionally in my life that I now have to deal with. In the book, I also included some professional opinions about the psychological effects of it and behavioral patterns that come after that trauma. Next slide. To get more into the design process, the first thing I did was create a mood board for the style of the book. Those were my references for what it came to be the book. I wanted to go with a very raw and handmade feel to be able to portray the emotions of the text. From the beginning, I knew I wanted the color red to be a major part of the design because red to me is such a very powerful color, and I wanted to create an impact with my design. Next slide. For the process, this project went through a couple of edits. I created versions of the design and the theme that I wanted to try, while at the same time writing the text for the book and having to relieve some of those memories to create this book. Next slide. After many edits, this is the final product. For the cover, I wanted something simple but eye-catching. And I would say this is the part where I struggled the most with creating, which was the cover, connecting the cover with the inside of the book, because I wanted the cover of the book to be eye-catching, but not to overpower the inside of the book. Next slide. So the handwritten elements are a very important part of the design also, and I use that to bring both the inside and outside of the book all together. Because when I decided to use those handwritten elements, they are special words or quotes that are included in the text. So they bring together both things, and they're memorable things for me. So I decided to use that to connect the design all together. Next slide. On my designs, I like to incorporate texture to create a handmade feel. I would say that's one of the characteristics of my designs in general. I like to use a lot of texture in them. So I use a ribbed texture to let the reader feel the emotions of the story that I had to tell. So as you can see in the bottom right picture, there's the ribbed effect. And next slide. I decided to use collages to incorporate images into the design, and that way create a story through the text and the images. To create a story, because the text itself is very heavy, the story is very heavy, so I wanted to give the readers some breathing time to process the story, so I decided to create the collages with that. Next slide. So this is one of my most proud, I would say, collages that I made for the book. And it helps the design to be more dynamic, I would say. Next slide. So at the very end of the design process, I decided to create a poster to go with the book. I wanted the poster to be an extension of the book and further explore the style that I came up with for the book on a much bigger scale. Both the book and the poster are very raw and modern and express a lot of the emotions that are written in this book. So with this project, I hope to bring attention to not only a big issue nowadays, but also a very personal topic that is very both important and personal to me. And that is my project. I hope you enjoy my design, and thank you for your time.
So this is such a beautiful project. Is it possible to bring up the slideshow again? So Catherine, I love the way you're using this kind of formal design elements to ground the book, but then you're building up these layers on top of it. So the book feels worn. The book feels as though it is very much an object in the world and just not the transmission of words to reader. I'm interested in the I think it's the 2 more slides ahead. So here you've started the ripped paper. And you were saying that that was so important for you. And right, when we're looking at these kind of, beautifully printed, beautifully, constructed books, seeing elements that feel unusual for the atmosphere of that structure are always really jarring. But the way that you've placed them is so, it's visually jarring, but it's very easy to understand what you're communicating. So I'm interested, you've been using this limited color palette, and on this page spread where we have freedom and then the taped ripped page, if maybe you could give some language to that and talk about what is the content and why you made these design decisions.
So when I will have to tell you a little bit of the story. When I was 12, I moved from Ecuador to New Jersey, and I went back and forth a couple of times throughout all my high school years. So I had a lot of anger because of that. So I wanted to use the ripped effect and the tape and everything to give that emotion, to let people know like the anger that this girl felt at that time.
And it's beautiful to see you imagining visually that anger and frustration that a child feels, but in a way that we as adults have entry into.
Yeah.
And then the text that you've written is placed in these, kind of like in this beautiful cascade. It's like almost a waterfall of words. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came up with that layout and what the text says?
But some of the tags are words like shy, or again, anger, freedom, alone, all those type of things. And I came up with it because it reminded me of like tears, like you said, like waterfall, like tears coming down. So that's why I decided to make that kind of pattern.
It's a great juxtaposition with the other text. The other text feels very contained and
Yeah.
very comfortable, and the second page is so vulnerable and it's so raw. And the story that you're telling is such an important story for us to hear at this moment. And the experience of understanding what it means to be an immigrant, and especially a child who's coming to the United States. So who is your audience for the book?
Especially young adults, I would say, because I went through this when I was a teenager. It's such a crucial time.
Yeah.
Moving around.
How old were you?
I was 12, 11, 12, yeah.
Oh, such a hard age.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's plans for the book now that the thesis project is finished.
I would love to get it published, but because I really think right now, especially, is a big theme for people, and most people think of the parents sacrificing, but they don't think about the kids. So I think, yeah.
I think it's I think that this content and the way that you've delivered it to your audience is so it's like a beautiful gift that you're giving to somebody. It's like in some ways almost like reading a journal, and in other ways, seeing things that could mirror experiences of others. I wonder if you would think about doing workshops at local schools, hosting, or maybe through some local nonprofits. I know the New Americans out of Newark is a great group that's working on issues of immigration. Maybe finding ways of distributing the information that you have in your experience while also allowing other people to learn how to collect their own, to create, documentation of this over and over again, so we begin to understand this as the American story.
And that would be a great opportunity if I get to do that, definitely.
Yeah, I would love to see that happen. Has your family seen the book?
Not yet. They know about the project, but they don't really know what's in it.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for them to go and see it at the gallery and see the reactions.
And there is a gallery component to this. So how have you translated the book into the gallery space?
Well, the book, it's on a pedestal right now at the gallery, and with the poster that I wanted to go along with it, so people see the poster, and because the book is very small, so I wanted the poster to kind of be the center of attention, so people gravitate toward it and see what the book is about.
And I'm sure that small scale makes it a very intimate experience
Yeah.
for the viewer.
Yes.
And when it is published, something portable that can go with the reader wherever they are going, as opposed to, a coffee table book, which demands, a kind of
Yes.
space and presentation. What is the process for you in terms of integrating handwriting into the formal design?
I use my iPad for that. I use my iPad and my Apple Pencil, and then just write whatever I'm feeling at the time, and then just exporting that too.
There are a couple of touches to the handwritten language that I love very much. The circles over the eyes in New Beginning.
No.
It reads so much as actual handwriting as opposed to fabricated handwriting. It feels very much in the moment and of your hand, and the way that you've let some of the text exist above the image and some of the text disappear. It feels like I'm overhearing a conversation between people.
1 minute left.
Grasping pieces and then losing pieces. But my last thing would be to say to you, I really think this is an incredibly strong and incredibly important project. And I really hope you find ways of bringing it to young people so that they can learn and create conversations amongst themselves of this experience. Thank you so much. What a beautiful project.
Thank you. Thank you for your critique.
Thank you. And so we're going to move on to our next student, Michelle Soto, whose project is about COVID-19.
Hello. To start, I've always had a passion for painting and drawing. I used traditional mediums for a majority of my life, and once I entered university, I began drawing digitally. I carried over my skills using traditional mediums and grew an appreciation for how quickly I could work digitally. Next slide. Next. The series I'm presenting today, titled Life with the Modern Day Monster, is a collection of digital illustrations that I imagined while working as an essential worker during the peak of the pandemic. Next slide. This is an image of what you can find at the gallery when you go see the show. Next slide. The first piece, titled Hands of a Hero, is a rendering of my hands in a pair of single-use gloves. I did not feel like much of a hero, but to customers I helped every day, I was, just for coming to work. Next slide. New greeting is a representation of the new way people had started greeting each other because handshakes were no longer recommended. Next slide. For individual sale represents how things you wouldn't normally find individually wrapped are now being sold this way to avoid contaminating from COVID. Next slide. Really is a representation of how the pollution in our oceans has gotten worse because of the irresponsible disposal of single-use gloves and masks. Next slide. Toilet paper represents how the value of toilet paper became indispensable during the pandemic, literally flying off shelves everywhere. Next slide. New normal shows the most common expression I would see on people's faces as they came to shop in our grocery store, showing feelings of worry, sadness, and discontentment. Next slide. I Can't Breathe represents the divide that occurred between people that would not wear their masks correctly, claiming they can't breathe, and those that truly cannot breathe because they contracted COVID-19. Next. Price and demand represents how common household cleaning supplies became suddenly extremely expensive. Next slide. Unsung Hero depicts a bottle of rubbing alcohol and antibacterial soap as superheroes, but no one really gives inanimate objects this recognition. Next slide. And finally, Modern Day Monster is my interpretation of the COVID-19 virus. I have a love-hate relationship with this piece. This is the modern day monster of our current time, and the reason I developed anxiety. However, I believe creating this series was my way of coping with my feelings, and I would always be grateful that I was able to work through them using art. Thank you.
What an overwhelming series. I think for so many of us, it's been hard just to be a person, let alone do a deep dive through illustrations into this pandemic and that fear that we all carry. I think that the work is incredibly powerful. When I think about what artwork is, I love that it's a conversation with someone. And I always like to think about who the artist is, where the artist is, and when the artist is. And immediately when I look at this, I know exactly when the artist is. You know, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing these images, but reframed for me, you know, depicted in ways that are much closer to the emotions that are held rather than just the products themselves. You know, the beautiful heroic portrait, you know, even the way that you made what was it, the alcohol and the antibacterial soap.
Yeah.
You made them these like monumental characters, and it reminds me of, you know, looking at portraits of like the Justice League, where it's like so over the top. But you know, it's this wonderful portrait of these materials that we didn't really think about and now become our day-to-day ideas of what we need for daily maintenance of health. You know, and I'm thinking about the portrait of the two elbows touching. You know, this piece in particular, it's so strange. You know, 2 years ago, no one would have any idea of what the language of this piece would be. We might think it was like modern dance or, you know, what's happening. But this idea that you have captured this new way that we interact with one another, you know, and it's both kind of a farewell to the intimacy of a handshake, but an embracing of we can still be close and we can still come together. I think in so many ways this is really brave work, and especially given, you know, who you are in the world, that you were probably coming in contact with people much quicker than so many of us were. And every time you're meeting somebody at the work, it's all that anxiety or all that worry that they're experiencing for the first time. And you're probably like, this is the 30th time today I've had this conversation. And the way you were able to isolate that into individual pieces. So you're building these in, is it Procreate?
Photoshop.
Photoshop.
Yeah.
How did you've made the series consistent by creating this backdrop.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about your decision to do that and how the project evolved?
So essentially everything is on a black background because I wanted to show how I'm imagining these things with
Yeah.
my eyes closed. So it's just a dark background and shine some light on the important parts of the piece, just to literally shine some light on issues that are going on. Or in this case, I feel like in the Modern Day Monster piece, that one shows like a real shining some light on a focal point.
Yeah, I love how you anthropomorphized it. But this, before I get to that, this glove piece,
Mhm.
it becomes very cinematic. You know, as we're looking at it, the way that you've created the lighting effects, The way that we are looking at our own hands, even though they are your hands, you know, the placement that you've given the audience. And then the reframing of the pieces consistently with the title. I love the marriage of the title and the piece very much. And so we're looking at this, and then we see Hands of a Hero, and then all of a sudden it's reframed for us into our contemporary battle with COVID and our experience with COVID, and the protocols that are in place for PPE, for, you know, especially the early days of things like grocery shopping. You know, your rendering style is exquisite, and
Thank you.
I think that because you're so good at creating images, they become much more approachable. So you've taken this very hard topic and rendered it visible in a way that is not off-putting. And I think that is a huge achievement.
Thank you.
And then can we go to the scary COVID? You know, I think of the humor that you have of the toilet paper, you know, presented in this kind of like, you know, I feel like it's like something being presented to the Queen of England, right? Like it's this like hilarious, like velvety pillow with gold tassels, and it's the most mundane of objects that we don't think about. And there's so much humor in that. And there's a slight bit of humor in this because it's becoming this character, but it's so very much connected to every horror film I have ever seen. You know, and it's the way that you've paced the story of the presentation where the, you know, the monster is revealed at the end of the movie and we all jump. You know, the way that you've created the progression of what COVID is and the experience of COVID. You know, this is the monster that's living in all of our heads every time we, you know, leave the house. I just think you did such a beautiful job. And you said it helped you with your anxiety.
It did. It helped me work through it. After working as an essential worker, I experienced my first actual panic attack.
Oh, they're terrible.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. It was just, sorry, it's a hard topic.
Oh, of course it is. If it's not comfortable to talk about, you don't have to. But I just want to say you're not alone in that. You're not alone in those feelings. I think even people who don't talk about it are very much feeling all of this. And especially in these winter months when we're so isolated and left to our own creations, they get bigger and harder. And I love that you are using your artwork as a vehicle to not only confront them for yourself, but to give people a new kind of visual vernacular to apply to their own ideas about this. And you're adding to a conversation that we probably won't fully understand the effects on our mental health for years, maybe generations to come. But by you putting this out into the world, it helps. You know, it gives us a point of reference and it starts a conversation. And I think that is a tremendous gift to give your audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go on to the next student, Erika Flores, who's going to present, graphic design student who's going to present her project on night terrors.
Hello, everyone. So my project's going to focus on child night terrors and nightmares. So I enabled the presentation a conversation between parent and child because I feel like it's a very important topic, and well, personally for me as well. I created an educational publication and an infographic poster to go along with it for the presentation in the gallery. Next slide, please. So a conversation between parent and child pretty much began from a personal experience for me. From ages 9 to 12, I would have so many endless sleepless nights, nightmares. I would keep everyone in my household awake. My parents wouldn't sleep at all, even though they had to work the next day, and they wouldn't really understand why I kept getting scared. And obviously at that age, I couldn't understand either. So they assumed it was something I either watched in a film or a scary story somebody told me. And then they started educating me on the difference between real and imaginary and telling me how certain things I may see on TV could be real, but they're actually pretend or someone hiding behind a mask. And as I got older, I started researching documentaries actually on how certain movies were made to meet the actual monsters behind these masks, and to sort of constantly remind myself of my parents' advice. And eventually now I'm a huge horror movie fanatic. And for my project, I wanted to kind of share my experience and the research I did to help other parents who I know are struggling with their kids who may have the same experiences I had, because I know a lot of children in my family are currently having those experiences. So I felt like it was my place to sort of help as much as I could to any parent who's confused or child looking for some answers or a better understanding on the topic. And here on the right, I just put some screenshots of the certain articles that I use from doctors that I found on the Psychology Today website that helped me with my research. Next slide, please. To start off, this is my front cover. I decided to use the word guardian just because I wanted to be like a broader topic, because I know there's so many different parent relationships out there. It's not just by parents by blood, it's also by adoption or by marriage. So I wanted to be very welcoming to any sort of individual who has a relationship with their child. And for the image, it was kind of hard for me to find a perfect image, but I felt like this one that I selected with his father and his son looked great, because I wanted it to be the goal I wanted to express of them being intimate, close together, and just happy. And next slide, please. So for my first spread, on the right side, it's just a digital image of it, and then I put the mock-up on the left. It just starts talking about how a child experiences anxiety, when it should be something to worry about, the different forms of anxiety like social separation anxiety, or when it's just straight panic. And there's some tips and tricks about how parents can help manage their child's anxiety and things not to do when their child is severely anxious. And since there was so much information that I felt was very necessary, I didn't want to cover it with too much illustrations or photographs. So I just decided to keep the simple image of the parent and their child holding hands on the bottom right section. And next slide, please. And so for this spread, it starts going into the topic of children watching scary movies and their video games. And I really enjoyed playing with the text on the left, because I felt like that dripping kind of gave like a Halloween theme. And the images that I worked with, I feel like it brought the child inside like the horror movies that they always watch or the video games that they play. And then I also wanted to include, to start the conversation, of a child going to sleep on the bottom right. And in this topic, it just talks about usual tricks and questions that I know everyone did as a child to try to convince their parents to get things their way. And it's a reminder, the article is also a reminder of parents that there's nothing wrong with saying no. It doesn't make you a bad parent, because everyone wants to make their child happy. And it's better than it's creating limitations rather than just preventing them or putting them in a little bubble. Next slide, please. So for this one, I took a different approach. I created the illustration of the two envelopes that could create like a conversation that I found from an actual parent, who Dr. Rosen, one of the doctors that I found their articles from. And I wanted to give it a different view for parent readers to hear from an actual parent writing to the doctor on what's currently happening with her daughter, having inconsolable screams and crying for like 20 minutes every night that she doesn't know what to do, and then seeing the doctor's actual response to her on how not to be scared, that this is very common with other children, and some tips on how to help them and what not to do. And next slide, please. And for this one, I would say this is my favorite spread to work with, because the bottom left image, I really liked when I found it, because I like the silhouette of the girl kind of floating up in the air. It's kind of like gives you the sensation of how it's like to get in the dream state. So I added that pink gradient in the back, and the illustration on the top, the photograph on the top right, I like, because it looks like a sort of like dreamlike state and everything. And with this one, it goes back to talking about the scary movies and video games, and talks about long-term and short-term harms. differentiating between what type of harm it would leave on a child from seeing a scary monster in a video game to long-term harms of actual traumatic events. So separating the different, like educating the parent on when to worry and when it's okay for them to just be scared temporarily. And next slide, please. And for this one, I decided to put a little spread to talk about the actual horror movies. And I found this interesting article as well about someone talking about how it's actually good for your anxiety. It talks about how, in a way, subconsciously, it creates a sort of control for the viewer. Even though it is something that scares you, it gives you the control of stopping the film or controlling your fear. You know up to how far you can get in the movie. Take a break, turn on the light, and relax, and then you could continue watching it. And it subconsciously creates some sort of real life skill situations of getting yourself out of situations where you know you'll get scared. So it starts the description of all of that. It gives some examples of people who have had PTSD for certain movies or certain events and how they've overcome it through watching more films, actually. And I also included on the right side in the little film roll, actual images that I found from well-known classic horror movies like Halloween, Jaws, The Shining, of how they actually look behind the mask, them joking around with the people on set. So it could show whether the parent is viewing it by themselves or if their kid is beside them reading this booklet, they can see and laugh with them that it's not real, that you can see that this so-called monster right here is actually playing a role. And next slide, please. So for this slide, it starts going more in depth on the actual nightmares and how to overcome them and tips and tricks for parents to help them when they're currently having. I think one of the best tricks that I read throughout my research that I thought was amazing was telling your child to draw out the monster that they're seeing in their heads, to especially not to laugh at them, even though it may sound silly to you as an adult and everything, it could be very scary for them. So to see it, and when they're finished drawing it, tell them to rip up the paper and throw it away. So and subconsciously, that's their way of destroying the monster that they're seeing. I maintain the same layout information on the left, keeping all the information there. And on the right side of the spread, I included my infographic that I created, the 18 by 24, because not everyone can take the 18 by 24 home with them. So I just included there because it's a quick preview that shows the step-by-step information that's inside the booklet and some illustrations that I created of what the topic is on. And next slide, please.
1 minute left.
And this is just the back cover. That's just a photograph that I found was perfect because it talks about the expectation I have at the end of the viewer. Whenever they're finished reading, I want the parents to walk out into a new path with their child together and a great understanding of what their child is thinking and processing information. And last slide. And just the last slide is just a bigger version of the 18 by 24 poster. It's just a quick preview that you can see in the gallery itself that has all the information inside the booklet itself on the percentages of children and how to help them. And that is my project.
So you are clearly passionate about this subject. And, I think as designers, sometimes we wind up doing such a deep dive into the content that we're reading and get involved with it. And then it's our job to figure out a way to get other people to connect with it. For me, above all, your use of images and text within the layout, there was a real tenderness. The first image of the father holding the son. There's such, right? So at the beginning of the magazine, we're being told through the text that we're dealing with anxiety, that we're dealing with childhood anxiety, childhood nightmares, night terrors, but we're immediately met with this image of care and tenderness, right? And the way the child is being held, there's a vulnerability there, but total protection from the guardian. So, and I think throughout the magazine, you're doing this. You're pairing beautiful images with the content so that the viewer is led along through the kind of narrative that you're creating. The layout in particular that I wanted to talk about was the letter exchange. I'm not sure what slide number that was. But the first slide that you showed us of the text that you were sharing from Psychology Today, it's very much scrollable content. You know, it's very much this like how we read things now. And then the treatment that you gave it in the layout, I thought, especially for something that's supposed to be a magazine format, was so much more inviting to read. And, you know, the allusion to snail mail, you know, this idea that it's something that has been taken great care and great worry, is packaged up and sent to someone. And here, you know, Frazzled in Philly is getting a response. And I think that the way that you've staged this would create a great deal. Oh, and I'm out. Hello? I'm so sorry, my computer just freaked out.
I can still hear you.
The way that you've staged this, it creates a great deal of comfort, you know, so as the adult who's reading this information, having the spread be so large and the information so available, I thought would be very comforting to your audience. And right, as a designer, we're always thinking about who is our audience and how do we communicate with them. And earlier we talked about in design, we need pauses, you know, we need a space to breathe, and the pages that are dense are not consistent throughout the layout, so that it doesn't become overwhelming to get through this information. Can you tell me a little bit about your choice of style of type, of line length? How did you come to the conclusion that these were all the best fits?
1 minute left.
So for the headers, I wanted to just keep it bold because I was going to be changing the colors for the subheads and the headers. I wanted to keep them very bold so I could change the colors throughout each spread depending on what the photograph was being used, because I didn't want to keep it like a consistent color of all red or all blue. So that's why I picked a very like thicker font for that. And for the writing, I like the Gill Sans because I feel the Gill Sans font because I felt like it worked very well. The only different one that I used was for the letter because I wanted it to look more handwritten. I couldn't write it myself because my handwriting, no. But that's, yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was all evenly spaced, and I felt Gill Sans is very popular and commonly used and easy to read.
Readable, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A very good choice. Wonderful design. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Sorry about the tech issue.
Thank you very much, Erika, for your presentation. So we're going to move on to our next student, who's also a graphic design student, SungSoon DeSousza, who will be presenting her project on coming of age.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming to the virtual artist talk. So today I'm presenting my body of work called I Am Breaking Free. Next slide. So Breaking Free, I Am Breaking Free is a illustrative memoir which presents courage, anxiety, and determination to pretty much move out from my family's home, which I felt was filled with stress and very strict religious lifestyle in order to acquire my own freedom and to take charge of my own life. My body of work is in chronological order. So it started with like from my childhood to adulthood. And I visually represented myself as like the main character of the story, and the figure that you see on the right, that's how I represented myself with glasses and wearing purple and green outfit. Next slide. The inspiration that I started this project was I saw the opportunity to tell a story, and the image on the left was like one of my earliest comics that I drew in elementary school. I thought about to tell a story of my own personal life, and I wanted to challenge myself to be vulnerable and to illustrate my life in a way that could be understood to viewers. And moving out was definitely like a life-changing decision. And many artistic influence was started with reading Japanese mangas, so such as Naruto, Full Moon, Osakashi, and Case Closed. And also developed further by studying references and photographs from real life and examining techniques from various artists online. So I also started drawing digitally as well, and Adobe Photoshop was pretty much my main art medium for my illustrations. Next slide. So all my work presented here was done by Adobe Photoshop, and my process of creating them is, started with drawing on paper, and then I would scan them and color it digitally on Photoshop. And all my body works was pretty much from my memories and my emotional response to those memories. And many of them have like symbols that had like recurring themes in my work, such as the birds were like the symbols of freedom, and like the blue sky was like the symbols of the balanced worlds of opportunities, hopes, and dreams. Next slide. So like I mentioned before, there are all in chronological order, and the way I choose which memories from my life are the ones that were very unforgettable or were very impactful for me. Next slide. So, and my experience in depicting these like memories gave me like an opportunity to stand back and assess all the situations. I actually moved out like 8 months ago. So while I was sitting down in this, this new home, in this new environment, I was like drawing these experiences, and it kind of gave me the opportunity to almost like you look back at it and you relive in these experiences. And it's almost like I kind of realized that many of these experiences were never healed or never resolved. So and I also look back at it and see like, oh my God, like this is, what I overcame. And like, this is like where I came from. Sorry, next slide. And like, also like finding an apartment was also like one of like the challenging part of like my experiences. And it took me like a month with like research, took me lots of research to find like which apartment was like within my budget, and definitely like my expectations versus like what happened in reality were like completely different. So I even had like my moments where like I felt like I wanted to give up because like I wasn't sure like if I was like rushing to move out. All right. Next slide. And then I think once I did find the place that I wanted to settle in, like it was a sense of relief, and then it was a sense of like almost peace in the beginning where I could finally like take charge of like my own life. Next slide. And then finally, this is like one of my last piece, and I wanted the journey of like my adulthood to continue. And in the future, like I would love to continue presenting this illustrative memoir in the future and kind of compare to see like how much I change, how much I mature. And also like, I'm also interested in the process of story making and reaching to audience of like various topics that like interest me. And the people like I want to reach out to are the people who also had experiences as well. And I would like to, and I think as an artist it's like powerful to like able to like communicate this idea in a very like in a visual setting. So so that's like the end of my presentation. Thank you.
This series is unbelievable. This is so beautiful. You know, it's so brave to talk about who we actually are, as opposed to kind of the person that we imagine ourselves to be, or the person that we hope others see us to be. And the vulnerability that you have given us is really beautiful, you know, and it's drawn in this incredibly you know, it's kind of like half a photograph and half a memory kind of merged together. So it has clarity, but it also has this kind of fuzziness, and it feels so authentically beautiful. This piece in particular, this final, this is my favorite of all of them. I don't know if we're supposed to say we have favorites. It's my favorite. When I'm looking at this, it is complete freedom, you know, and it's interesting because the mask is a new addition to our lives, but there are moments in the outside where we can take the mask down, so it shows this like extra layer of kind of reveal and freedom. And the way that I would like to point out, the way that you have rendered the front bike wheel on that bike is amazing. Like, how do you show motion? And, you know, you're obviously, the figure is going at a fast pace, but how do you show that without it being overwhelming? And I think one of your gifts as a storyteller through image is you seem to know exactly how much to reveal and how much is unnecessary information for our eyes. And while that is not the focus of the image, because you've rendered it so well, it allows us to just immerse ourselves into that environment. And then the other piece that I felt was just this like peak, you know, it's like I could hear the music swelling as you were talking, of you in the kitchen making your food, and this little smile of like, it's not even like joy, it's contented. And I think that that's a very hard emotion to depict. But I see this, you know, there is contentment and you're caring for yourself. And it's a moment of, again, true independence. The way that you've paced the story for your viewer makes these two moments incredibly powerful. You know, I think without the full series, these two individual moments don't have that impact. And I think it's because you're such a brave person, and because you have accomplished so much with your life. And I might be repeating myself, but being a person is the hardest thing there is. Like, it's impossible. And you have created this narrative where you've told us what we need to know to understand the success that you have. And so the impact of making dinner all of a sudden isn't just making dinner. It isn't just a bike ride, but it's the success of this human in the world. And it's just a truly powerful drawing. And again, in the piece at the supermarket, this allusion to bags of chips without the detail of the chips allows us to know the environment we're in. Like, I look at that and I'm like, I have been to that supermarket. I have been to that deli, right? And I'm looking at it and it's there, but it's the story that comes across. And I think it is very hard to fill a picture plane with information and still allow there to be focus on the story that's being told. And you do that exceptionally well. So you would like for this to be in the world somehow. What is your, how do you want to, what's the deliverable? What's the thing that's going to be in the world?
Let me see. Well, so the question is like how I will deliver like all these pieces. That be the question.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would love to like present it like maybe in the space where maybe like in an office, or like maybe in a counseling or in a therapist like office, where it has that space where like it discusses about like very like personal issues and things that people like go through that maybe not everyone wants to like talk about. So, you know, in the space where in that kind of environment, like it would be nice to kind of like have like my artwork like presented in there.
I would love
1
for
minute
this
left.
to happen.
Yeah.
This piece of you looking at the for rent sign, much like I was talking before, I love how you're using scale. Like the figure seems so miniature in front of this giant wall of buildings, and this like entry point of it being for rent, but the kind of the way that the arms have been situated, there's a kind of like tension in the figure that is both hopeful and completely intimidated. I'm so impressed with how you draw the figure and connect it to these emotions with these simple gestures. Your work is really beautiful. I hope it goes out into the world in some way, even if it's like a zine, you know, or a book that could be left somewhere. I feel like this is a story that will resonate with a lot of human beings in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, SungSoon, for that really great presentation. Very powerful work. So our next student who's going to present is Fernando Soarez. He's a sculpture student, and he's going to be showing us his work about the fragility of memory.
Hi, how's everyone doing today? Hopefully good. My name is Fernando Soarez. My BFA is called Recollection of Childhood. And this collection of work is all about my childhood memories and their degradation through time. Basically, I don't remember anything before freshman year in high school. Everything's just kind of a blur or it's just blank. There are some things though that I remember fondly. And the pieces here are depictions of the keepsakes that hold those memories. But because I know my memory is faulty, I have this immense apprehension that sometime soon, all these very fond memories I have are going to melt away into nothing. And that feeling is what I'm depicting with these pieces. Next slide, please. So this teddy bear, I had a lot of stuffed animals growing up. They were pretty much my best friends. And I chose the teddy bear specifically because when you think of stuffed animals and childhood, teddy bear is somewhere high on those lists. And I wanted that connection with childhood itself and my stuffed animals. I wanted this one to look very defeated, sort of like it had all the stuffing ripped out of it and it was discarded and forgotten about sort of as time went on. And the little leg over there that's broken, like sort of broken and contorted, is relating to another piece that'll be shown later. All the pieces kind of relate to each other, but I'll show that later. Teddy bears are also pretty humanoid, you know, they have a head, they have two arms, body, some legs. And I wanted that sort of tertiary connection to small child, sort of that child being me. So this teddy bear is working with the tie to my own stuffed animals disappearing, my childhood itself being discarded, and childhood me also being forgotten about by myself. Next slide, please. And so this one, I played way too many video games as a kid, and the Game Boy Advance was my console I spent most of my time on. Some of my happiest memories are spent playing this thing, and I wanted to depict how I view the possibility of forgetting it all. Sort of this icon of my happiest moments melting away into this puddle of just color. My Game Boy itself, it's over here, has a bunch of stickers on it, and they're really, what's the word? They're really distinguishing, and I wanted to take those distinguishing features and sort of erase them from the Game Boy, sort of melting away and vanishing with the figure of the Game Boy itself, all melding into this puddle. There's also some finger indentations sort of on the Game Boy where you would hold it. And I wanted to show that sort of no matter how much I try to hold on to it, I know it's gonna disappear at some point. And it's kind of speaking to that powerlessness that comes with forgetting things. Next slide, please. And these shifts, little background for the BFA show, I wanted to use all the skills I learned in my time at NJCU. So these were modeled in CAD software, computer assisted design, and then 3D printed out. I had a bunch of these little model ships growing up. It was sort of a weird childhood obsession. And these things are sort of playing with the idea that the purpose of a keepsake is lost once the memory associated with it is forgotten. So the most important things of these ships, the masts, are sort of flopping over and becoming useless. The next couple of slides are just close-ups of these ships because it's kind of hard to see them all. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I wanted the rigging to be really prominent, and that's why I use contrasting colors for all of them. And I wanted the rigging to seem sort of like it's holding the ship back, it's sort of strangling it. So it's not moving because there's a lack of sails, there's the rigging holding it, and the masts themselves are gone. They're not useful at all. And some of them, I had them caught up on each other. So they're not only hindering themselves, they're hindering each other. Sort of as you forget one thing, sort of like a domino effect. Next slide, please. So I also included some photography in here. These photos are depicting my hands stitching together the same teddy bear that was made of ceramic earlier. It's stitching the leg that the teddy bear had broken and contorted. And I wanted it to sort of show my attempt of repairing my memories. That's why you have this this white sort of glowing background. Because when I remember things, I don't really see the background. I just see sort of a still image of a thing, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, I wanted the rings on these hands to also be very prominent because they feed into another piece that is on the next slide. Next, please. And these rings are more representative. I didn't really have, jewelry wasn't important in my childhood, but I wanted to tie woodworking and jewelry into this as well. I wanted the box to be sort of a traditional keepsake box with the black walnut, the curly maple, and the splines in there. And these rings were also modeled in CAD and then printed out in casted and pewter and then physically melted with a torch because I wanted that sort of lack of control that comes with melting metal. And I wanted that to be sort of in the process of the piece because I haven't really had the lack of control in the process. So I wanted that to show up here. And these are the rings in the photo to kind of hint that my attempts at stitching are failing. That even though they're in this box, safe and sound, they're still going away. Next slide, please. And this is how it sits in the gallery itself. I thought it was really important that everything be set in sort of a diorama-like setting of a child's room. Because when I think diorama, I think three-dimensional photo, and it's sort of like a moment in time that's frozen. So, and the positioning of everything, I wanted it to really speak to each other and be sort of a gradual discovery as you look throughout the piece. So on the nightstand over there, you have the box of rings with the photos surrounded by them. And all the picture frames have pictures of kid me in them. So I took them out and then put the stitching photographs in there. And the teddy bear is next to the photos and kind of front and center. I wanted that to sort of be the thing that people see first. It's sort of this cuddly, cute little thing, and people like sort of gravitate towards it. And I thought with it being a representation of child me, I want that to sort of be really easy to look at. I had it before where we're sort of surrounded by stuffed animals, but it did get kind of lost. So I took those out. And as you sort of continue through the thing, there's a bunch of Game Boy games on the floor, sort of blending into the carpet. And The one stuffed animal I still have from kindergarten is back there behind the toy box, just kind of hiding. And on that toy box is the Game Boy and the ship sort of circling around it, because there's this sort of water feel that comes with the puddle of Game Boy, and the ship sort of getting caught on each other as all that goes. And all of these pieces of furniture, the toy box, the rug, and the nightstand are all secondhand items. Like I got them off the Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that, because I wanted the items themselves to have their own like hidden story. So I didn't want to just go out and buy something.
1 minute left.
I figured it was really important that the pedestals that these things rest on are telling their own story. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen.
Fernando, we have the same childhood friends. I know this world. I know this world very well. First, I am so excited to hear about the way that all of the work is in conversation with itself. And the display of this kind of adult you version of a child's play space is very interesting. The way that all of these things have a kind of individual meaning and are standalone, maybe the same way that the objects did to you as a child, but now they're all placed within this space and time has passed and they're all showing that wear and that adult knowledge that's now shaping our perceptions of them. The pieces themselves individually are really fantastic. The teddy bear and the kind of like the corduroy foot face being so smooth, and then the sculpture itself feeling so squishy, but knowing it's made of something that is just the opposite. So it's this kind of loved object that's frozen in time. And the way that this kind of idea of holding memories and holding things, but in doing that, it has completely rendered it other than it existed in the beginning. And there's something in the metaphor of that I think then permeates all of the other pieces. We're looking at the bear and then we're seeing the repair of the bear or the restructuring of the bear. And as I was looking at those pictures when you were first showing them, I was thinking, these very distinctive rings make it so that it is a specific person handling this object. And then to find out that these rings then are actually part of the project, and even though they seem so tangible and real in the photograph, have completely melted and become these other objects. I'm very interested in the way that objects hold our memories, and objects, once they're gone, maybe we worry that we no longer have connection to those memories anymore and that they're then gone. And the way that these rings appear in a photo and then the kind of the destruction of them appear in this beautifully crafted box. It's this perfect conversation between these two pieces. What seems, just extra in one piece, all of a sudden you realize is the core to the next project that you are going to give us. And the thread here, as it's repeated then within the ships themselves. And it's interesting because the ships, the way that they're photographed, feel very big. And then when you see them in the setting, and they are these toy boats, or toy ships, they are these like little melting objects that then mirror the language of melting of is it a Game Boy? Game Boy.
1 minute left.
I'm so impressed with the way that you have connected all of these things, and even the thoughtfulness of having secondhand objects that already have a life and a memory that has been forgotten being the pedestals that everything is put on. It's just a truly impressive body of work, and to have created it now is kind of amazing. You must be exhausted. Which of the pieces is your favorite?
My favorite is personally the Game Boy.
It's exceptional.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It was nice to see that it resonated with the audience. They're like, I'm a gamer. And yes, that's like, check plus, like, well done. Beautiful work, Fernando. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to Abimalec Barreras, who's an illustration student, and he's going to present his work that deals with social issues.
All right, should I share my screen or it's going to come up in the PowerPoint?
It's going to come up for you.
Okay, cool. All right, you can leave it right there. Thank you very much. All right, first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank my mentor, Martin Kirk, for really being a great hand and all of this. It's been an honor to work with you. And I want to thank NJCU for allowing this program to happen. It's truly an honor. And yeah, so about myself, I am an illustrator. I'm a graphic designer as well, who focuses on social consciousness. My work is also created in Photoshop and Illustrator. And you can find me on my Instagram, which will be posted on the next slide. Anyhow, my illustrations are based on juxtapositions, and my work is appropriated imagery from various media sources, embellished by digital sketching. My work is actually inspired by Shepard Fairey, Roy Lichtenstein, and the sorts. And you know, my work mainly consists of social issues that affect me and those around me. Next slide, please. You can skip that. Next slide. And my first image will be Botox treatment. So Botox treatment focuses on the juxtaposition of pop cultural beauty versus consumerism. It's like all women are beautiful, but there seems to be one standard of beauty. Next slide, please. No lives matter. All right. This piece touches upon unawareness and consumerism. This touches upon the metaphor of an ostrich burying its hand on the head. People are only listening to one side and not encompassing different perspectives. We have created a pragmatic system that is based on dogmatic principles that do more harm than help. I believe that we're missing didactic discussions because people are stuck in past issues. Some might have advantages, but we all have the same rights. Next image, please. Pink collar ghetto. All right, this one's very interesting. This one touches upon socioeconomic and versus consumerism. This touches upon how one person experienced an oblivious life and how the other is experienced it. In this image, we can see how in the foreground, we can see the image. We can see her like at the making a stand for all these issues per se. And you know, she's not safe from rape, domestic violence, and religious aggression, thus me depicting this image. Next slide, please. A third of fatness. All right. This one juxtaposes greed and consumerism. It's like pretty much a third of the world starving and the other 2/3 are being overfed. Next slide, please. The media is your God. All right. This piece touches upon how we have lost touch with ourselves and how we are forced to believe everything we see and read. There's a sense of division and different agendas being played out on different media outlets, thus creating further division. I believe that we have to create unbiased media. Next slide, please. I love your hair. All right. This one touches upon the problem that we should not advertise in unethical practices. We should fall in love with our roots and embrace them and not dismiss them because the media has told us so. Next slide, please. Wealth disparity. All right. Wealth disparity touches upon socioeconomic climates and consumerism. In a way, we have created an illusion of separation and have become oblivious to the suffering of others. Next slide, please. Life evolution. All right, this image juxtaposes compassion versus consumerism. This touches upon the idea of selfishness and a lack of empathy towards others. We care about our suffering, but we often ignore the suffering of others. And that will conclude my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Your illustration style is beautiful.
Thank you.
I love the way that it kind of exists in these fields. And then the line work on top is like, that's great. You have mastered this style. This last piece, I think in some ways reminds me of some work by the artist Martha Rosler.
Martha Ross, I'll take a note.
Yeah, check out her work. I think you might find some commonality in terms of not execution of the idea, but in terms of the content. I think you've tackled a really hard topic, right? Like this idea of reflecting on the culture that we are in, right? Because we are in it, so it's sometimes hard to see these conundrums that we face, right? Like how we're approaching them. The style that you've chosen is very glossy, you know, and so it mirrors some of the delivery devices that we get. And so I think the aesthetic choices that you've made in terms of addressing these really difficult, you know, the content was very smart. I wonder how do you see these existing in the world?
In galleries, shows, museums. I'm currently looking in the Midwest if I could put my work up. I'm currently emailing people and whatnot. So yeah.
And you said you mentioned Instagram. So is Instagram important to you?
Yes, it's very important. If you go back to the artist statement, it will be right there in the artist statement.
Because I think that, you know, social media platforms could be an interesting gallery space for you to be exhibiting in, because your work is in conversation with people. Right. So, you know, placing them in the view where everybody can then be in conversation with the work and you could be very interesting. You know, when we're looking at these pieces and you know, it's so much this kind of Instagram culture.
Yeah.
Be on Instagram and then while simultaneously critiquing the Instagram culture and asking people to address the content. You know, we can scroll through videos on like TikTok for 6 days before we remember we're a person. And to be interrupted by something that challenges the language of that platform could be very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. Currently working on it.
Good, good. Thank you so much.
All right. No, thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to look at the work of illustration student Alexis Castaneda, who's going to present her work, A Culinary Exploration.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis Castaneda. I am an illustrative student. So today we'll be showing my work, Culinary Exploration. This is going to be a series of illustrations based on food. So I like to convey the differences that define people through food and to spread awareness of historical abundant aspects of culture and hoping to shed some light on the importance of food in this long journey to the modern era. Next slide. So here's my first one. This one is titled Peru. This dish is called pachimanca, which is a traditional dish dating back to the 1400 CE. This is actually a dish made in the earth, essentially called the earth oven. This belonged to the Incan Empire that lived in the Americas way, way, way before all of us were here, of course. But this is just something that hits home with me and hopefully it looks very yummy to you. Next slide. Next one is a French croissant, which many of you know. This history begins in the Ottoman siege of Vienna that started on September 27th, 1529. So a long time ago. This happens to be the Battle of Austria against the Turks. And they've actually won against the Turks. And for celebration of the winning of not being taken over, they created a pastry shaped as a crescent moon, which was on the Vienna's flag. So how did it come to France? Marie Antoinette is from Austria, and she did have to marry Louis XVI. So Louis XVI is French, and she requested the dish to be made at her French palace. And that is assuming the story. We don't know if that actually happened, but hopefully you enjoyed the illustration and hopefully it looks delicious. Next slide. This one is Japanese sushi. The first mention of sushi dates back to China in the 2nd century AD, but it looked very different from now. It was actually simply just fermented fish and rice. And it actually originated in China, as I said before, and it migrated over to Japan. And Japan found a way to limit the fermenting process. And then over generations, the food became to what it looks like today. Next slide. And obviously pizza, which is a favorite of mine, started actually as a peasant food in Naples. It was so easy to make, most importantly, cheap to buy, and you can put numerous of toppings. So the story of pizza is a royal couple in 1889 visited Naples. King Umberto I and Queen Margherita, name sounds familiar, was tired of French cuisine and ordered a local dish. And one of the dishes was margherita pizza. So a long journey will, sorry, lost myself. So the journey was actually, this pizza is peasant food and actually very cheap to make. And that's kind of similar to now, well, except for some places. Next slide. And donuts, another of my favorites. Donuts actually come from vast history and cultures and places. So I have research, it comes from Russia, from the French, Berlin, and Native Americans, and probably much more other places. But it's still quintessentially American dessert. Next slide. And this is hot pot. If you don't know, this is a Chinese food item. There are 2 different soups served in this specific bowl. This actually started long ago from from a long ago from Chinese, when Chinese people were being invaded by China. Sorry, collecting myself. When the Mongolians invaded China, but soldiers have to eat. And the way they found to eat without carrying so much supplies is using their helmet as soup bowls. And they would dip various meats and vegetables to eat as they traveled. So that is for Chinese hot pot. Next. And then this is the last of the 7 illustrations. I have more work afterwards. This is hamburger. So in the 19th century, hamburger was actually from a town called Hamburg, and it is a real town. It's a real German town. They were known for high quality cows, which meant high quality costs. But that changed, however, when hamburger made its way to America, and it was named Hamburg steak. The only difference there was the cheaper quality of meat and an added bun. Next slide. And here I have formatted the first illustration, Pachimanca, in a magazine spread, which it goes in detail on the food process and the story. So I wanted to create a sense here of what kind of magazine you're looking at. You get a little sense of the culture and obviously where the food is from with the illustration of Machu Picchu. Next slide. And here is the French croissant, French cuisine. Again, this is going to explain more in depth why Marie Antoinette is connected to the croissant and goes further detail of the Battle of Vienna. Next slide. This is one of my favorite ones, Japan. This obviously has Mount Fuji in the back, explaining the story of the long journey it took for sushi to get to what it is today. Next slide. And the last one, this is pizza. I've illustrated, obviously, the Leaning Tower of Pisa and the story that in depth of Queen Margherita. So all these magazines and illustrations, I hope to extend them, and hopefully all of the stories of the food illustrations have their own story and they continue. But for now, I have 4. So that is the end for me. Thank you.
So let's first talk about these amazing illustrations. So tell me how you're rendering them. Are you starting with photographs? Are you starting with sketches? How is the image built?
Yes, sure, of course. So what I usually do, this is all digital illustrations, but what I usually do is I compile a bunch of like images of food that is included in the dishes, because some of these are not arranged. Like I just had to make the arrangements up. But I would obviously look up food. Maybe sometimes I would buy the food or cook them to see what they look and how the texture feels.
You've given yourself this huge project of not only creating these illustrations that are these beautiful little studies, like vignettes of the texture, the illusion of aroma, right? This placement of a still life, and then the additional challenge of creating an entire layout where those images are embedded with additional illustrations in ways that enhance what you're talking about. The images themselves are stunning. You know, the croissants, my Lord, that looks beautiful.
Thank you so much.
You know, you can take, when I'm looking at this, I'm seeing the visual representation of something that is light and flaky, you know, as opposed to when I'm looking at the sushi, or I'm seeing the density of the rice contained within the seaweed. You know, and I think what you're doing with these illustrations in itself is beautiful. But then when they are paired with the text that you gave us within the layouts, it's just exceptional. You know, this image of Machu Picchu is beautiful and could be a piece on itself, but you've created it in a way that it becomes a frame that the illustration of the food sits within, that the food still is in the hierarchy, the most important thing on that page. You know, and I think that that's, you know, that's an incredible achievement as a designer, when you can take the arguably like one of the smallest elements of the page and still allow that to be the focal point, and allow everything else to radiate from that. And you had said the sushi layout was your favorite?
Oh yeah, it's because it took so much time.
They are our babies when we spend that much time with them.
Exactly.
But your placement of type, you know, whether it's the title or the display type, and then the copy type, they all are individual. So as we're going through the pages, our eyes are not bored. We're not just seeing the same thing repeating. And you've really showcased your abilities incredibly well with this project. I'm also so delighted at the history of the things that we consume so, you know, quickly. You know, learning how, like the hot pot story, that was fantastic. So how did you get this information? How did you research this?
So a lot of research went into these stories. I just wanted to pick something that was like really engaging. Like there's a bunch of stories where these foods could have originated from. Obviously, I try to get the ones that are most interesting and fun. But yeah, just a lot of research and a lot of time to make sure portraying them actually relays the way I want it to.
Can we go to the croissants again? The layout? Yes. You know, when we're looking at them over and over again, the way that you're creating these layouts is super engaging and giving us this, you know, kind of cutout of yellow on top of this white background. There is so much information, and then there's so much visual delight within that layout. This one, you might, you know, be in love with sushi, but I am in love with the croissants. I think that this is such a beautiful page spread. I'm really impressed with you, but a tremendous amount of work you've done.
It took a lot of work, but it was fun. It was fun.
Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so we present our final student today, Brandon Regis, who's an illustration student, and he's going to show us his Cobalt Universe project.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brandon Regis, and for my BFA project, I've created a illustration mural called the Cobalt Universe. For most part of my life, my desire for art, I've always been more traditional when it comes to drawing on a piece of paper with pencils and inks and painting. I've had experience with digital art, but for the most part of my life, I've more focused on traditional. For my inspiration, I start, not only do I love comics, but my inspired for the piece that I've done, I was always inspired by films and shows and anime. So, sorry if I'm pausing myself, just trying to get myself together. Okay. But the Cobalt Universe coexists with, not just heroes, but I also want to I also have characters based on original concepts, as well as characters based on my own interpretation, whether it's Greek mythology, horror, and as well as aliens. So, jumping to the next slide, the piece was done by 14 by 17 drawing paper, 65 pages total, and the piece is the size of it is 6 foot by 22 feet. And and I kind of want to set them up as, as a get together of sorts. So jump into the next slide. Right now, you can see the right side of the characters. They are done by using a ton of paper. You can see sorts of many different characters, from giant monsters, kaijus, to dinosaurs. Jump into the next slide. You can see on the left side, we have this giant cosmic character who was basically out of proportion, and as you can see, we have more monsters. My own take on what a kraken would look like, and just many different sorts of aliens and monsters. So jump into the next slide. And as you can see, we have more characters. In the bottom, you see more heroes, more monsters, and as well as this particular character in the middle. This is basically represents this sort of god of this universe. So jumping to the next slide, you can see this piece in all of its glory. And this photo was done using the panorama effect. So I had to take this photo real close and just zoom in everything. And and yes, I had. I'm sorry if I'm being nervous. But yeah, I believe that's it for the piece.
Don't worry about being nervous. Speaking in these things is like torture. It's so hard. It's like you live with this work for so long and it's in your head, and then you have to explain it to everybody, and it's a daunting task to say the least. But the work is exceptionally huge. I can't imagine how you have created this. You know, and it's fascinating to think of how our work has changed based on the spaces that we are in. And I love that you've created this tile work that opens up into this entire universe. I assume you've used like 3 reams of paper to create this.
Yes, and when you have a workspace that's mostly done in my bedroom, so it's kind of a challenge. But I always say I always prefer to challenge myself to see what I could do with this. And the amazing part about this is not everybody in this mirror. I realized when I was close to finishing this up, I realized I had more characters that I drew up my layout for the piece. So I was like, oh wow.
So I used to love when you would get those the comic books that were the collections of all the superheroes, and the front page would be everybody, and you could, like, it was like a Where's Waldo. You could spend days just identifying and looking at everybody, and then you'd open it up and you'd see everybody's powers and their origin story, and you know, it was, that's the feeling I get from this. It's like half nostalgic and half I just want everybody to leave so that I can study all of the characters and see who they are and imagine who they might be. And I think that that is such a gift to give people right now, something that is so immersive and something that is so overwhelming that it's not something that you can just look at and pass by. You need to stay with this work for a little bit. And the consistency of drawing style, you know, when we're working pen to paper, it's very difficult to kind of be successful at that. You know, there are so many things that can go wrong, but your use of, you know, heavy ink and then light ink, the line work, it's all, in terms of production, it's beautiful. But then when we start to look at the content and the amount of characters that you have designed, you know, like Jack Kirby, I don't think created this in his lifetime, and you have achieved this in, like, you know, your time as an undergrad. It's truly amazing. Do you know the stories of each of these characters?
For the most part, I have a few. I'm writing a script up right now, and I hope to one day in the future publicly publish them out as a series for this world.
Yeah, it's I love the scale of it, and I love how brave you were to make something like this, you know, and create it and have it be so consistent. It's a true kind of monument to the idea of what comics give us, right? It's this kind of escape, and comics are bigger than life, and you've created that both in content and in production. So I think you should be incredibly proud of yourself. But I would love, maybe at your next talk, to learn some of the characters, you know, to get details of some of them and learn who they are, because that's like the information that I'm hungry for when I'm looking at this, you know. And for your next show, that might be something to consider, having a book that pairs with the mural, so that we can kind of, you know, find those characters that you've identified within this world that you've made. What were you using to draw?
For the most part, I've been using a 14 by 17 drawing paper.
Okay, and then what is it? Pen, marker?
When I started this, I started using mechanical pencils, starting with blue lead, and then started drawing the details with black lead, and then slowly inking the work done.
That's so smart. So you had a guide for yourself as you were building them.
Yes.
And it was originally composed on a small piece of paper and then transferred?
No, this is I don't know if I can show it, but this was the board that I've been using, sketch paper, 14 by 17.
I am so impressed with this project. And so this is now hanging in the gallery?
Yes, it is.
So what's the next step for the project? You've got the script now. Are you going to create a comic book?
Yes.
Oh, I can't wait to see this. Congratulations on an amazing project.
Thank you very much. And you can also follow on Instagram. My account name is Cobalt_illustrations.
I definitely will. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everyone. That was great, Brandon. So we've come to the end of our presentations. We still have, I guess, a little bit of time, but I just wanted to say thank you to the students and to everyone in the audience for coming to the show, to the presentation. And so I want to invite you to come by the galleries and actually see the pieces if you can. We have safety protocols in place, so you can visit, and we have the work up in all 2 gallery spaces, but also including the G-Sub, which is our general student union building, where you could see Brandon's piece, and in the Lemmerman Gallery, where you can see Fernando's work, and Abimalec's work is down in the visual arts building. So you'll have to travel to all 3 spaces to see all the pieces that you've seen here today. But I invite you to do that because some of them really do look different when you see them in the space, and you're able to sort of really encounter the work and look at the materials and look at the skill that our students are so clearly exhibiting here today. So I do want to invite students that maybe in the chat, you could put your Instagram handle in case people missed it. I'd like to thank everybody for having such a very engaged chat room. There were a lot of comments going back and forth in support from the audience. So if you guys could take a minute to scroll through, I think you might enjoy that as well.
Yeah, congratulations to all of you. You all did a great job presenting. And yes, I'm just going to kind of follow up. Everyone come see the stuff in the gallery because it really looks wonderful. The current gallery hours are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 12 to 5. If you want to arrange another viewing time, especially like all of the artists, if you want to arrange another viewing time to see with your family or some friends, just reach out to us and we'll see what we can arrange. So thank you. I can't wait to hear the next group next week now.
I also wanted to give a special thank you to Melissa. It's not always easy to give feedback, especially when you're removed physically from the work. And so I was really engaged with the feedback and the guidance. And it's clear that you're a really thoughtful educator, but also that you love stories. And so it was exciting to see your excitement even in the presentation. So thank you so much for giving your time today to all of us.
Oh, thank you guys so much. You really are an exceptional group of students, and to complete a bachelor's degree with everything that is going on is like beyond amazing. I am so proud of all of you, and thank you for the Instagram links. I will be following you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you all. I'm blown away by your work and your talent. You just elevate us. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful. I would like you to keep, we have a lot of things coming up. We have more BFA talks next week. I don't know if we have slides ready today to show, but if you visit our njcu.edu/arts to see all the times, and please come to all of the events coming up. We have an amazing event tomorrow with gallery owner and curator Stefania Panapento. And she did a call for art at the beginning of the year, and one of our graduates last spring is featured on, her art is projected onto the wall of the Canopy by Hilton Hotel, and she is now, her work is now being sold in the gallery at the hotel. So I would love it if everyone comes to that event. Just sign up online and kind of keep networking, make connections. You know, Melissa was talking about what do you want to do with the work that you've done, and networking to get your work out there is key. So please join us, kind of hear the talk that goes on tomorrow, and keep your work, you know, keep going because your work is amazing. So I'd like to thank everyone. Have a great day.